everyone, and welcome to the show. This is episode number 26 of Pop Culturally Deprived, and today we're going to be talking about Grosse Point Blank on your I Killed the President of Paraguay with a Fork podcast. I'm Mandy Kay.
And I'm Matthew Vose.
Today we are joined by a very special guest, New York Times bestselling author Kevin Hearne. Kevin is one of my all-time favorite authors, and his claim to fame for me is the urban fantasy series The Iron Druid Chronicles. Though you may be more familiar with his Star Wars novel, which is actually still canon, you guys, Heir to the Jedi. So thank you so much for joining us, Kevin.
Oh, my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Can you tell us a little bit about why Grosse Point Blank means so much to you? And because when I reached out to you on Twitter and said that, and asked you what your favorite movie was, this is one of the very first ones that you mentioned.
Yeah, this is one of those movies where I guess it just kind of pressed all my buttons at the time that it came out. I was a few years out of college, and I was living in Bakersfield, California at the time. And not particular. I enjoyed the work there, but the city itself was not what you would call a paradise. I didn't want to raise a kid there. It has some of the worst pollution in the United States because of oil and regular smog and then agriculture. So you got all this pesticide as well. Had like the second highest rate of asthma in the entire United States. So I was looking around and going, well, how did I get here? And Grosse Point Blank is kind of almost every character in it is asking themselves that same question. They're reevaluating their lives after, 10 years out of high school and going, whoa, this is, not where I thought I would be. And it just kind of rang my bell a little bit, and I loved it and related to it and wound up watching it 5 times in the theater. Kept going back. Yeah.
That's amazing. I was surprised whenever we announced that we were going to be doing this movie at how many people on Twitter got really excited because they're all love this movie too. And the consistent question I always get when we do this show is, how have you never seen that? Because nobody can understand how somebody can be that sheltered.
Yeah.
And with this one, honestly, I had never even heard of this movie until we were putting together the list for the podcast. I had no idea this movie even existed. And I think that's just insane considering how many people seem to love it so much.
Yeah, it's kind of a cult hit, I guess, out here. I don't know how well it did at the box office or anything like that, but I helped a little bit. I kept, because I kept going back.
Oh, we always try to give a little bit of history and production information for the movie that we're talking about because there are, shockingly enough, people out there like me who haven't seen some of these movies. So, Grosse Point Blank is an American comedy thriller that was released on April 11th, 1997. The initial script was written by Tom Jankovich, though there were so many revisions, not to mention improvisations, that D.V. DeVincentis, Steve Pink, and John Cusack also all got credit for the screenplay. Directed by George Armitage, the film was largely improvised. He said, with Grosse Point Blank, I shot 3 movies simultaneously. We shot the script as written, we shot a mildly understated version, and we shot a completely over-the-top version, which usually was what was used. We cast that movie, and I've cast most movies, by having the actors come in and read, then throwing the script out and saying, okay, let's improvise. Overall, the movie received a positive critical response. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a rating of 80%, Metacritic has it at 76%, and Roger Ebert gave it 2.4 out of 4 stars. He praised the chemistry between the lead actors and enjoyed the dialogue, but considered it a near miss, wishing for a wittier, more clever ending. And I think I read, I didn't put the box office numbers in here because they really just weren't that impressive. And I think I read that it came in at like number 6 for the weekend that it was released.
Mm.
So, I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it definitely wasn't a smash.
No, in total, I think it just about doubled its budget, so not too bad.
Yeah, yeah. So if you haven't seen the movie, Grosse Point Blank is about an assassin whose plans go awry when he decides to go home for his 10-year high school reunion and reconnect with his high school sweetheart. Sounds pretty innocuous, right?
Just that assassin bit.
An unusual thing to bring back to the high school reunion and to say what that you assassinate people. Most
Yeah.
people, sell insurance.
Yeah, I'm honestly still shocked by the idea of John Cusack playing an assassin. That's kind of where I was when I saw what this movie was about. I was like, I feel like I have to watch that just to kind of see how they do that. It was very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. He's not your typical cold-blooded, sort of psychopathic, zero empathy kind of person,
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we do like to share with everybody listening how we watched the film this time so that if you want to watch with us, you can. And unfortunately, in the United States, it is not available on any of the subscription streaming services. So, what I did was I signed up for the free 7-day trial of Showtime through Amazon just so I could watch this. And I need to remember to go cancel that.
In the UK, it's on Sky Cinema, so I was able to watch it when I wanted to.
Oh, well, aren't you special?
Yeah.
I bought it on iTunes a long time ago, and I've had it, as part of my little library of movies. So I see it whenever I like.
And you watched it 5 times in the theater when it came out.
Yeah, there's that too.
That is dedication.
Did you watch it in the build up to recording the podcast? Have you watched it more than once recently?
No, well, recently, just the once recently. So, but I have watched it probably within the last 6 months as well, because it makes me laugh. My wife and I actually trade a bunch of lines, in our everyday interaction sometimes.
Nice.
So, yeah, we find it endlessly entertaining.
Awesome.
So, Mandy, other than not believing about John Cusack as an assassin, what did you have any expectations going into this?
No, I mean, like I said, I'd never heard of it. So for me, I was just expecting it to kind of be one of those fun John Cusack comedies that he was so prolific at doing.
And so, have you seen him in other stuff?
Okay, so you guys all know that I've not seen very much of like 80s, early 90s, like rom-com teen things, which is what he did a lot of. So I did not actually discover John Cusack until 2003 when he did the thriller Identity, and I absolutely fell in love with him in that movie. And then he did that, end of the world movie 2012, which is also really stupid but really good. And then he did have kind of like this adult rom-com period where he did some really, really bad rom-coms, but I love them anyway because one, they're rom-coms, and two, he was in them. So things like America's Sweetheart, Serendipity, Must Love Dogs.
I love Muslim Dogs.
Do you really?
I do. That's like one of our favorites. Yeah.
See, and I think that's the worst one on the
You
list.
do.
And
I'm a dog lover, so it's kind of worked for me.
I am too, and I was so disappointed in that one because I love Diane Lane and I love John Cusack and I love dogs, and so that movie should have been made specifically to delight me, and I was just sad. But yeah, I still love John Cusack though, at least in what I've seen. I understand
Yeah.
my experience of him is much smaller.
And we've definitely got a few more of his on the list to get through. I think 16 Candles is on there, but we've also got High Fidelity. I suspect we might have Thin Red Line might also be on there as well.
No, that one's not, but I know Say Anything Is and Better Off Dead is.
Better Off
Yeah.
Dead is where I first became aware of him, and I loved him in that. That's a movie that well, it cracked me up as a younger person. Then I watch it now, and I'm like, wow, I was in a really weird place, and I like that. It hasn't aged quite as well, but I still think it's funny, especially the newspaper kid in there wanting his $2.
I have no idea what the movie's about, so one day we'll do a show about it and I'll finally get to see it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see your reaction to that one.
Well, maybe we'll invite you back and have you be on that show with us too.
Okay.
As far as Minnie Driver and Dan Aykroyd go, I know less about them. For me, Dan Aykroyd's claim to fame is My Girl because he was the dad. But of course, I have now seen Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's those two are really the only thing that I can think of off the top of my head that I've seen that have Dan Aykroyd in them. And then Minnie Driver, Good Will Hunting. I know her from that. And then she did some like beauty pageant singing movie that I can't remember what it's called that remember liking, but I have no idea what it was.
High Heels and Low Lifes?
I couldn't tell you,
No? Okay.
honestly.
A side note on Minnie Driver. Good to see a Brit with a good American accent.
She's
Oh, I
British?
didn't know.
Yeah, born and raised in London. Um,
Oh wow, well then that was an outstanding American accent because I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
yeah, you don't often get that when Brits are cast as Americans, so. This is described as a black comedy, and I think we've definitely done one with Heathers. Does anything else come to mind that you've seen that put you in mind of this?
No. I remember struggling to answer this question when we did the Heathers episode because black comedies are just not something that I'm generally aware of, I think. And so Heathers is the only one that I can think of that would fall into the same vein, I think.
Okay.
But they're very different movies.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit lighter than Heather's is.
Yes. I mean, there's a little bit more blood in this one than there was in Heather's, but it was overall the tone was better, I think.
Definitely not as dark.
Yeah.
Okay, so having now finally heard of and seen Grosse Pointe Blank, what did you think of it?
I am so glad I really liked this movie. I was so afraid that we were going to get on the show and my favorite author is going to be on here talking about his favorite movie and I was going to hate it. And I was so freaked out that that was going to happen because we have not had a good run of movies lately that I've liked. And I am so happy to say I did really enjoy this and I would happily watch it again.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, and you should. It rewards multiple viewings, I think. My own 10-year reunion was kind of looming when this came out. I think I would have been a sophomore when Martin Blank was a senior. So I related to these, just the multiple 80s references throughout the whole thing. And then just I related to Martin's bewilderment about what his life had become and everybody else as well. And at one point, Debbie, the character played by Minnie Driver, she says to this other character, says, "Yeah, well, you're our demo, our demographic, because now she's in radio and she's playing all these '80s retro stuff at the radio station." It worked for me.
That's awesome. I I don't really get the 80s stuff and the 80s like throwback stuff just because I'm a product of the 90s. I mean, I was born in the 80s, obviously, but I was too young to appreciate it. So it's always nice to find people who just get really excited about that 80s throwback stuff, even as early as, I mean, this was only 1997, and already it was a thing.
Yeah, the '80s really did take on their own sort of, I guess, character. People talk about the '80s a lot more than they talk about the '90s as being memorable. So I don't know why that is for sure, but there seem to be a lot of shows about the '80s music and culture, and I don't see as many about the '90s. Although maybe I'm just not tuning in as much. I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I think that the 80s has a more self-contained identity than the 90s did. The 90s just kind of kept bleeding into the early 2000s. I mean, if you ask me there are some very specific 90s things that I could reference, like, the Spice Girls or things like that. But everything kind of that might be 90s related kind of bleeds into the decade after. And so it's not quite as isolated as the 80s was. And I don't know why the 80s got to be what it was. I mean, I guess you guys were just more awesome than we were.
I don't know. You could look at some of the hair back then and say, yes, that was awesome, or
Yeah.
God, that was a bad idea. But definitely did have its own identity. I'd agree with that for sure.
Yeah. I'm not sure why. I mean, because like if you look back previously to that, the 60s have their own identity, the 70s have their own identity, and I kind of feel like that ended in the 80s, that we haven't continued with that trend unless it, like you said, maybe I've gotten to the point where I just tune it out and I don't notice it, but I feel like that just doesn't happen the way it used to.
I wonder if the internet has done that because it's sort of homogenized a lot of stuff.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everything's so much faster now. It's not even that it's a decade that has a thing. It's this year to this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, fads come and go in the space of a week sometimes.
That is true.
So on Grosse Pointe Blank, we mentioned John Cusack as an assassin being a surprising casting, but I think given the nature of the character, he's pretty much the perfect person to have been doing this.
Yes. I think this movie was perfectly cast. I mean, everything about it was amazing. And when I started watching it, like, I was baffled at how this was going to work. I mean, Dan Aykroyd is an assassin. John Cusack is an assassin. We've got K. Todd Freeman being one of the feds who, well, I wasn't really sure he was a fed at first, but I finally figured that out, And just the way they all interacted with each other was perfect. And in fact, in my thoughts doc, where I kind of live tweet without spoiling actually on Twitter, I said a couple of times there were scenes and they played out exactly the way I would expect John Cusack and Dan Aykroyd to interact with each other in this
Mm.
space. And once I found out, when I was looking at the production information, how much this film was improvised, it made so much more sense because it really felt like rather than reading off of a script, these two characters really got into the headspace and they just interacted with each other. And it was amazing.
It does feel that it does have that energy, that improvisational sort of energy, and you don't think of it if you go back and look at it and see, well, wow, was that scripted? How did they script that? You kind of realize, yeah, they probably didn't. So
Yeah. There's a lot of very genuine reactions as it goes through, and then even the bit in the meeting in the cafe, John Cusack's walking out going ooh ooh ooh. It's so weird, but it works. They're not quite sure how to posture and get out of this situation.
yeah, absolutely. There's so much about it that I really enjoy. You can see that he was probably well. There's a scene where he meets his old high school buddy Paul, and they're in the car, and Paul it's Jeremy Piven, right? And
Mm.
he's asking him where he's been and all that. And that whole scene, you can kind of tell that had to be improvised, because the interaction there is impossible to script.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I didn't put this in the section when we talk about our favorite lines, but one of my favorite lines is actually in that car ride because Paul takes him to Debbie's house and Paul says, "Yeah, it kind of crept up on you, didn't it?" And Martin goes, "No, you drove us here." I'm just like, I don't know how they kept a straight face doing that because that was amazing. And it was just so snarky and sarcastic, but still so on the nose.
Yeah.
They had, and other lines, Debbie with Minnie Driver when she's after Martin left and she's talking on the radio kind of about what she's feeling and she goes, "What is this I'm feeling? Is this hunger? Am I hungry?" And she's really talking about, being heartbroken. And then she starts talking about being hungry. And it's so off the wall, but it's so spot on, when you are going through those levels of emotions. I mean, this is the guy who broke your heart and he was your high school sweetheart. He left you on prom night. You haven't heard from him in 10 years. And he shows back up. And obviously there's still chemistry because these two have amazing chemistry on the screen. And then all of a sudden,
Mm.
is this hunger? It cracked me up.
It was fantastic. One of my favorites is Alan Arkin as John Cusack's therapist, Dr. Oatman,
Mm.
and Martin's going in there for therapy. He's starting to feel really bad about his job or something. He feels ennui perhaps. And what I love about this is that this therapist clearly probably needs some therapy of his own. He's really not with it, and he's also wondering, like, Martin, how did I get here, and why am I so unhappy? But here he is now trying to counsel an assassin, and he doesn't want to do it, but Martin insists on coming, and so when he finally tries to help, I just think it's hilarious. He says, "Well, Martin, I don't want to suggest anything that might be uncomfortable for you, but you might consider the possibility that part of the problem, part of the thing that's making you so miserable, is the angst over killing a lot of people. Just put it in the background." And that kind of put it in the, put it in the background, And I loved how understated that was, and then Martin's like, "Well, I don't care about morality," and then he's even more, Dr. Oatman is even more depressed after that. So I loved all of his scenes. Basically, I thought they were perfect.
Yeah, Alan Arkin was great in that role, and I think it's so clever to have a character like Martin who is, I mean, he's a professional killer. This is what he does, but he's self-aware enough to know that he needs therapy. And so he's forcing this therapist to give him therapy, by threatening him essentially, "Well, I know where you live." And I think it's just it's brilliant from a plot perspective, from a story perspective of kind of getting us into Martin's brain, but also offers us some amazing humor.
Yeah, yeah, and I like, he argues, with Dr. Oatman about an emotional involvement, and Dr. Oatman says, "I'm emotionally involved because I'm afraid of you, so we can't
Yeah.
continue."
Hmm.
And then Martin just comes back with this argument about how really it's all on him and it's not anything that Martin's done. Yeah, their whole interaction is fantastic.
And he's used so sparingly throughout the film. And I'm not even. Oh, they have that one conversation over the phone after that. But even the moments where they're not speaking and you see the reaction from Oatman, and you see he doesn't want to go through it, or he's smashing up this answering machine because he's desperately trying to stop him recording. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually one of the great things about a character like that. He leaves you wanting more, which means you've done it right. You created a really compelling character there
Mm.
with just a few minutes on screen. So
Yeah. I think another very, very small detail in this movie that stood out to me, and I loved it, was the fact that Martin did not like sitting with his back to the door. And they never
Mm.
really, I think later he finally actually said that, but that first scene where he goes into the radio station and is talking to Debbie, and he's fidgety and he's constantly looking behind himself, and you kind of feel like he's just awkward because he's talking to her after so long, and you kind of feel like this is just him being weird. And then as soon as she gets up, he immediately moves to the seat that she was in, and he's fine. And you understand immediately this is another piece of who Martin is, of understanding that he's an assassin, so he needs to always be aware of what's going on. And if he can't see what's behind him, he doesn't like that because somebody could sneak up on him. And that's just a very small, like, I wonder if that was improvised or if that was in the script, because it's such a small detail, but it's a powerful one about who he is as a character.
well, I think that they must have scripted that to some extent because we find out later that of course he is being hunted. He's not just paranoid. There really are people after him, and because of that screw up in Oregon with the dog. So
Boudreaux.
yeah, so it makes sense that he's paranoid because he actually does have a price on his head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was, yes, very very good the way they did it. They were showing you his paranoia rather than telling you.
Definitely, and it's such a great character point that you can believe it, and it helps flesh out that he's a professional killer. Where without that, you'd only be getting it from the moments of violence. But this is, you can see it seeped into his core, the way to act and the way to move around the world.
Yeah, and
But
the way he dresses, right?
yeah, yeah, that everyone comments on. And the guy who comes up behind him at the party puts his hand on his shoulder and gets taken down straight away.
Yeah, and then you find out that the guy he took down used to be a professional wrestler,
Yeah.
but he still took him down super fast. Oh, great.
What do you guys think about the idea that when he comes on, I mean, he's been gone for 10 years, and so obviously everybody wants to know where he's been and what he's doing. And without fail, almost every time he actually says professional killer.
I love it. He goes ahead and says it because he pretty much knows nobody's going to believe him, and that they're going to think he's joking. And I love the different reactions to it.
Mm.
That they all immediately assume one way or another he's being a smartass, but he's being honest with them. And what's weird about that is almost everybody else is probably lying about, in some way presenting who they are, but he's being very honest compared to almost everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the way, like you say, he does it every single time, and there's always a slightly different reaction. And I'm now wondering, is that because of experience that he knows no one ever believes him, or is this part of why he's in therapy? That there's no legitimacy to what he does. No one believes him. He can't talk to anyone about it, except for other professional killers who appear to be awful people. And he just wants someone to actually have a conversation with him about what it's like.
Yeah, that probably is it. I didn't think about that before. That his entire existence, it probably revolves around people asking him, what do you do? And he always has to come up with something. And it's probably a barrier to forming any sort of meaningful relationship because, of course, he really is a professional killer. That is certainly a barrier. But then he can't even, really lie convincingly about it.
Oh couch salesman.
Yeah, I sell couch insurance.
I wonder though, it's such a unique idea, I think, to have him. One, he uses his real name. Two, he has an office and a secretary. He is running this as a legitimate business.
And giant filing cabinets. Do they have like files on everyone they've killed?
I mean, dude has a fax machine in his car in
Yes.
1997. I mean, so this is like a legitimate business for him. So, and I feel like it's that way for other assassins in the area. I mean, they're trying to start a freaking murder club here. They're like unionizing, being a mercenary, and it just that kind of baffles me a little bit because that's not usually the take that we get. When you think of other assassin movies like Jason Bourne, it's all very hush hush, off the grid. Nobody actually knows your real name or who you are. And it's just interesting to me that not only does he kind of have a legitimate lifestyle, even though it is kind of in secret, he walks around and tells people what he does. I don't really know what I think about that or if or what it may mean, but it struck me as interesting and different.
Yeah, they didn't go into the details, but what I kind of assumed about that business front was that he had this what do they call it, Trident Global or International or something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever their company is supposed to do, that is all just to launder the money that he's bringing in as an assassin. So he's got a legitimate front to basically launder all of his, killing money.
Okay. I didn't even think about it that way,
Yeah,
but that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, you'd have to do something, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Otherwise, you just have, bricks of cash taped under your desk.
right, right. Well, and what's out here in Colorado, what's happening is because of marijuana being a cash business, because you can't put any of the proceeds into banks because they're federally insured, right? And so, in federally, marijuana is still illegal. So what that does is it means that all of these guys bringing in all these cash or all this cash from marijuana have to figure out some way to launder it so that they can get it into banks. So what they're doing is buying real estate, and the real estate market is ridiculous here. They're just going with, briefcases of cash, buying houses, flipping them, getting the cash out, and now it's been laundered and cleaned, and they can put it in the bank.
Huh.
So I mean that's how you got to have, when you have some sort of illegal source of money, you always have to have a laundering operation, and I'm
Right.
sure that's what he's doing.
Thank you for teaching us how to crime.
Yeah, I don't know a ton, but I'm learning a little here as I go. Do some research for books, right?
Right. Research. That's what it is.
It's all research, I promise, NSA.
Matthew, you had a couple of points in the doc that you wanted to talk about.
I'm quite interested as the film goes through. There's a couple of moments where Debbie says to him about having a spiritual moment. Shakabuku, I think. A swift spiritual
Hmm.
kick to the head that alters your reality forever. And he talks towards the end about seeing the ocean on fire in the Gulf and how it was beautiful. And he thought there was more going on to life. But there's this moment in the middle where he's given a baby. Not given a baby. He's asked to hold a baby for a short time. Um, hey, assassin,
Hello, welcome
have
to
a
your reunion.
baby.
You feel like a baby.
Um, but he's asked to hold this baby, and just the film goes quite intense at that moment at this incredibly cute young baby looking at him and kind of smiling, and him looking back with this shocked expression on his face. It almost feels like that is the shakabuku. That is the thing that makes him go, "Oh, holy crap! I could actually be having a genuine life and children and love and stuff." Am I reading too much into it? Do you guys see that? Is there something else there that feeds into any of that?
I think they were intending us to get that impression just because of the way they shot it. They kept going back and forth between the baby's face and his face, and he kept getting this like more and more look of epiphany on his face
Yeah.
as they were doing that. And then it's not too long after that he decides he wants to marry Debbie, and
Mm.
he realizes that he doesn't want her to be scared of him or to hate what he does and all of that stuff. And and I think that's when he also something changes in him, and he talks about how he was only killing the people who were going to kill him first, and he reassures Debbie that the only reason that he killed was because that guy was going to kill him first. And so I think that there is some sort of internal mental shift at that point.
Yeah, I would agree that that's supposed to be the emotional tipping point for him, for sure. They were playing Queen's Under Pressure with David Bowie, and
Mm.
that whole scene, first with the mom of the baby, she's an old friend of his from high school, and she's talking about how marriage has really been awesome for her, and it's not, the end or anything like that. It just keeps getting better and better. And so she is a huge contrast with Martin right there. They went to the same high school, and they had completely different outcomes. He cracked under the pressure of high school, and what is he going to do when he graduates? And he became an assassin. The pressure of society turned him violent. But she, on the other hand, wound up, falling in love, getting married, and having a kid, and she's incredibly happy and fulfilled. And so he's looking, at this baby and realizing, wow, I really could have had a very different life if I had just kept it together. And
Mm.
now he wants to fix things. And I think the whole movie is about not just him, but everybody trying to fix what went wrong with their lives, whatever it is. You see this multiple times with multiple characters wondering, how did I get here, and how can I fix it now? Is there a way out if I'm feeling trapped, right? So that's another thing that I really love about it, is that it really makes you think about your life, and then how you might want to fix it as well, for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's such a great way to come at it. Yeah, I hadn't really put it in together with him comparing himself to her entirely. But yeah, the normal thing for a story like this would be the midlife crisis of, do I get married when you're engaged, or do I stay in this marriage? Do I philander? Something like that. He's having a crisis. Do I continue being an assassin, or do I go and settle down, and so on? So it's, yeah, a much nicer way to come at it and tell that story.
Yeah,
A different way,
absolutely.
at least.
And I was wanting to bring up Bobby Beamer.
Mm.
Yeah, Bobby Beamer is this Bobby Stefano, I guess, is his actual name, but his nickname is Bobby Beamer now because he owns a BMW dealership. So he looks like he's been this privileged jock, during high school, and
Mm.
now he's still a privileged businessman. So he's been privileged his entire life, but the way they present this character, you never feel the least bit envious of him because he's pretty pathetic. He's this emotionally stunted man. He's habitually using drugs and alcohol to distract himself from his own misery. And when he's trying to confront Martin, and Martin just doesn't take the bait. He doesn't want to fight, doesn't want to hit him, certainly doesn't want to kill him or anything like that. Bobby Beamer is already utterly alone. He hates his life. It's all self-inflicted. Nothing that Martin does can hurt him any worse than he's already hurting.
Mm.
And I thought that, that was he's a very minor character, but he represents probably somebody we all know from our own high school experience. And it's kind of, looking at Bobby Beamer like, wait, it's almost Schadenfreude,
Yeah.
looking at how he turned out. He winds up reading a poem. These are my words. And he's like, "That's the problem, Bobby. Express yourself." That he tells him that, and maybe Bobby after that, we don't know what happens to him afterward. Does he improve or not? He was so drunk and stoned at the time that he probably is going to wake up in the morning and not even remember the whole thing. So we'll have to project a little bit and wonder if Bobby Beamer is going to get his life back on track or not. I love that they put that in there, that it wasn't all just, the unusual kids. They're looking at, what happened to the popular kids too, and the popular kids are not the focus. They're sideshows in the background of the movie.
Yeah, it's really terrific how it is very much going back to high school, meeting all the different characters you could meet and seeing how things could turn out. And he's had this crazy life, but perhaps now that's what he needs to get into.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to compare it to another 90s high school reunion movie, Romy and Michelle's high school reunion.
Mm.
But I felt like that was just a little bit too, I don't know, too insulting or too different or whatever. But I did keep seeing the parallels between the two because you are seeing how different everybody's life turned out. But I think part of that is just the nature of reunion movies.
Yeah, probably so. I don't remember that one very well. I know I saw it, but I can't remember the details.
It's okay. You probably don't want to remember the details.
I remember it for the post-it note scene. Just coming
Yeah.
up with the chemical composition of a post-it note glue.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
The rest of it, yeah, utterly forgettable. But that's it goes through some of the same stuff, but doing it about their friendship rather than about one person's journey.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay.
Say, I have another question, kind of just about the movie itself and what they were showing us versus what they were telling us.
Hmm.
And there's a piece that I didn't really quite understand what they were trying to do. So in the beginning, when Marcella is keeps telling him, she's reading him his high school reunion invitation, and he is having none of it. He is not interested. He wants her to burn it. Stop reading this to me. I'm not going. Blah blah blah. He's just very emphatic about it. And then this job comes up that he has to go to. And oh, guess what? It's near home. And all of a sudden, he's like, well, no, I still don't want to go. And he's still pretty emphatic. But something happens and he flips. And then all of a sudden, he's really excited to go home and be there. And I couldn't really understand what triggered that change unless it was literally just he got there and realized, oh, I'm actually going to see Debbie. But I didn't feel like that was clear. Did I miss something big that they were trying to tell us?
I think he was. It was all about Debbie. I think that the rest of his high school experience he didn't want to relive because that's what made him snap in the first place. But so he didn't want to go back to what had unbalanced him before. But he did truly love Debbie, and he was talking about Dr. Oatman with it, right? He says, "Oh, I had another dream about Debbie. You mean that girl you're obsessed with?" And he says, "Well."
Hmm.
They go into a conversation about the definition of obsession at that point. But um, I think that it was basically when it came down to, well, I could maybe see Debbie, then he's like, all right, that will be a reason to go. Plus, I have a job. So I think maybe that was the reason why.
Okay.
Yeah, I put it down to that conversation with Dr. Oatman. He says, I'll go down there, I'll kill some time. No, don't kill anyone.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the thing that convinced him to go down. And then it obviously incites Dan Aykroyd to dob him into the feds.
Yeah.
Mandy, I know as you watched it, you picked up on a couple of Buffy actors in this, which will
I
always please you.
did. Yes, I get super excited. Kevin, you're a first time guest on our show, so Buffy's kind of my thing. And I try to somehow reference Buffy in every episode of this show, which can result in some acrobatics trying to get there. But this one, they just dropped it in my lap. I mean, there's so many actors in this that showed up on Buffy. K. Todd Friedman was one of the two feds. He was in season 3 of Buffy. Carlos Jacot was in Buffy, Angel, and Firefly. And then I forgot until you were just talking about Bobby, but Michael Cudlitz played Bobby Beamer, and he was actually on Buffy too. And so that just made me really happy. I mean, this thing has no ties to Joss, so I don't know why all these people ended up together, but it makes me really happy that they did.
Can I give you one more Buffyverse crossover that is the sort of thing only someone as nerdy as I will pick up sometimes? He goes to visit his mum in the old person's home.
Yes.
Do you remember the Angel season 3 episode where the old man takes over Angel's body?
Yes.
It's the same old person's home.
Really?
It is. I don't know if it's a set or an actual old person's home or something, but it is the exact same room. Yeah,
Nice.
I have a screen grab that I did for a friend of the show, Lani Rich, when she covered it on her podcast. So I will be
That
posting this on Twitter, I think.
Okay, that is amazing. I love it when my fandoms collide and when everything kind of, I mean, it's a small world obviously, but it makes my heart happy whenever I can bring everything back to Buffy.
That must be some place out in L.A. then, where they were shooting that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
because you never expect to recognize the interior of a place because they just make the set and then they tear it down again. But this was, yeah, the fireplace is the same. I think it's painted the same.
I have to be honest, I was not paying attention to the set at that point because I was so angry at Martin. I guess this is where I can bring up I have a thing with characters who I consider to be really terrible human beings. And I kind of feel like Martin is a really terrible human being.
Oh, but he has scruples.
He does, but okay, he didn't know that his house had been torn down and that his mom was in an old person's home. Like he didn't know. Like how do you not know what's going on with your parents unless you're a really terrible human being? I mean, at least he did at some point he did turn around and say that he sends money, but that doesn't really make sense either because if he had been sending money to the house, well, once the house got torn down, it would have been sent back and he should have figured it out. So I don't really know what I'm trying to say here other than I was really, really upset that he didn't know kind of what was going on, that his mom was this sick and that she couldn't live by herself anymore and all this other stuff. And, that bothered me. So I didn't pay attention to that.
Yeah, I got you. That was obviously, I guess his father must have been an alcoholic, and because he poured out that bottle of whiskey on the grave.
Right.
So probably not, a happy home life, and maybe that, he had just been alienated, and he figured that sending money would, I guess that would take care of his duty as a son to make sure his mom was supported financially. But yeah, it seemed like the sort of thing that he would have asked Marcella to do, just send them money and then he doesn't really get involved. And
right.
He kind of, yeah. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying there. He's obviously not had a close relationship, and only when he gets back home does he realize I'm a little bit out of the loop here. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I will say we are compiling a list of really terrible human beings that I actually like. They are few and far between, and
Yeah,
I think
both of them.
no, I think we're up to like four now. But I think Martin can be added to that list because I do like him. He makes me laugh, and he makes me a little bit crazy too. But it's John Cusack. How can I hate him?
He's very charming.
He's very charming.
But he's also trying to get better. He realizes he's got issues and he needs to improve. And he's not sitting there. He's not going to wallow, and he's not going to just say, "Oh well, I'm bad, so I guess I'll embrace it." Instead, he's actually trying to improve himself.
Yeah.
And as it goes on, he realizes just how bad everything is. As his constant thing of "it's not me" when he's killing people, or people thinking that he just wants people dead, comes to the point where Debbie confronts him and he says, "Psychopaths kill for no reason. I kill for money. It's a job. That didn't come out right." And it's just, and you can see him realize, actually, this is a little terrible that I've completely justified my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was wanting to talk about how they're pretty clever with the soundtrack choices and how they choose songs that, if you think about them, have some sort of relevance to the scene or the characters in that scene. And one of my favorites was when he kills the assassin who's after him at the reunion, and then he and Paul Spiricky roll up the body in like some pep signs, and then they take it downstairs to stuff it in the furnace. And while they're doing that, they're doing it to 99 Luftballons by Nina. And I love it because for several reasons. One of it is I actually have a line in my first book from The Widow McDonough about friends helping you with murder. A friend will help you move, but a really good friend will help you move a body.
Yes.
and that's what that scene is this really good friend from 10 years ago helping him move a body and getting rid of it. But the song 99 Luftballons is all about a war starting over a misunderstanding about 99 balloons released into the air near a border. And then because the radar picks them up and doesn't know what they are, they scramble Air Force to go out there. And then when the Air Force gets there, they say, "Oh, well, here's here's a bunch of balloons, so let's just shoot them down for fun. Well, then when they do that, that violence or that shooting down of balloons near the border kind of causes an international incident, and now we've got a
Okay.
war starting. Just basically a war starting that lasts for 99 years, and all of this just death and destruction, basically over a misunderstanding. And Martin, this whole situation with Martin, like the reason this guy came after him was a misunderstanding or over an accidental killing of a dog in Oregon. And so now he's got a price on his head because he accidentally killed the dog. And he's got to basically be on the run for his entire life because of that accident and not for an actual, assassination that he did. So I thought that was an interesting choice for the song title. Of course, it's a really peppy song, and it just kind of worked for the scene, as, a soundtrack thing. But the meaning behind it also related to the content of the movie. So and then the Under Pressure song during that climactic moment, emotional moment for him was also, relevant to, his particular character. So I like what they did there with the songs.
I think that's great. I never would have picked up on that, largely just because I'm not familiar with most of the music used in movies like this. I don't know 80s music. And I mean, this podcast is called Pop Culturally Deprived. Of course, I'm not familiar with 80s music. And so I would never have picked up on the meaning behind it. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, but that's just, yeah, I've watched the movie way too much, and I just really start thinking about it. And I just like to see what they did there. And they did quite a bit of thoughtful stuff in what seems to be an otherwise almost improvised movie.
Yeah, absolutely. That shows how masterful it is. When you can be that intentional and also improv at the same time, I think it means you've got the right people working on your movie.
Well, yeah, and that's why it rewards multiple viewings. Not just because it's amusing, but you might find some kind of Easter eggy kind of thing there that you can geek out about some more.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about things that we really enjoyed with the movie, so I think it's probably fair to say that for all of us, a lot of the movie was our favorite thing. But let's specifically call out some of the things that we really, really enjoyed in the movie. For me, you guys, Joan Cusack is a national treasure. And I basically loved every time she was on the screen. But in the end, when she's liquidating the office and she's got the gas can and she's just throwing it on everything and she's got the cigarette in her mouth, I adore her. She's such a minor character in the movie, but I think, honest to God, that was my favorite scene in the whole movie, just because she is she's getting things done and she's doing what she needs to do, and she was amazing.
She goes through so much in just one shot of her, basically. She's so excited to be trashing it and putting all the gas out, and then she gets a call from him that she's confirming, and he says, "I'll get things sorted and then I'll come find you." And her reaction is just, why?
Oh my God, you're gonna kill me.
But then she finds she's got what is clearly a lot of money. That's quite a big brick, and she's just over the moon with it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I would be over the moon too.
Yeah, I just love her. He hangs up, and then she's looking at the money. She just puts her hands up, like a touchdown, and goes, "All right!" And I
Yeah.
love that bit. That was fantastic.
Yeah. And God, John Cusack, I love him. I do. And so after the convenience store explodes from the guy trying to kill him, and he's rescued the teenager who was completely oblivious to everything. The next shot after the store has blown up, they've kind of been thrown. They're laying on the grass. Martin just rolls over and puts his head in his hand, and he's just sitting there like, whatever. And it's just so casual, so nonchalant. And I feel like that is the scene that really defines Martin. That tells us who he is, because everything about him just appears there, with this, I don't care, whatever. He really has no passion for life or for what he does. He doesn't care that, this building just exploded. And I loved it. I thought it was great.
Too cool for school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that he went into the Ultimart, that used to be his home, and he calls Oatman and says, "You can never go home again, Oatman, but I guess you can shop there." and I love that bit quite a bit. And then that literary illusion. And then I loved when he went to his former high school and he catches his English teacher outside, Mrs. K, and he asks her, "Are you still inflicting all that horrible Ethan Frome damage?" And
That's a valid question.
it was fantastic because we all remember these books we were forced to read. Like, how did this become canon? And I just love that he's still remembers that part of his education. He is quite well spoken. Obviously he was a smart guy and remains a smart guy. But I love the fact that he goes back to his English teacher and just frankly tells her, "My God, that was terrible," and she admits it and says, "Yeah, it's off the curriculum. Don't worry."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that comes at the same point where you have him seeing his mum and going to his dad's grave, and it's just three interactions that tell you so much about his childhood and growing up before, obviously, the incident with Debbie and so on. It's lovely development.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just, I mean, it might not have seemed like, why would I care about this English teacher thing? It's just because I taught English for 17 years and I had to teach some books that I just absolutely loathed and didn't think I should be teaching. So I completely sympathized with both sides of that particular conversation. Martin as a student, because I remember, reading books I never wanted to read, like Dostoevsky. Followed by Chekhov. Like, my teachers had this obsession with Russian literature and wanted to depress the hell out of us, I guess. And then, I also appreciated from Mrs. K's perspective that she didn't particularly enjoy teaching it either. And now they're both happy that that is gone.
If we're talking on the actors, Dan Aykroyd and Jeremy Piven are fairly used with a fairly light touch, but they both do the thing that Dan Aykroyd and Jeremy Piven both do in movies and TV. They just come in with just banter and wit and lots of quick dialogue and then go off and do something else. Every scene they're in is just so much fun because they call each other out on, they call Martin out on things and he calls them out, and it's really high class stuff that you don't get in a lot of other films. Everything with them.
Yeah, I don't do these neural drugs. I ingest it on orders from my neurophysicist, Yeah, Aykroyd was great. He was fantastic.
And this must be a fairly early role for Jeremy Piven. He's not quite hit his sort of entourage, big personality moment yet, but it still shines through every time he's on screen.
It definitely shined through. I remember when they got to the reunion and, Martin is talking to, what's her name? Was her name Jenny? Was that her name? The one in the blue dress?
Yeah.
And Martin and her just having a conversation, and he is just constantly interjecting, "Hi, Jenny. Hi, Jenny. Hey, Jenny. It's Paul. Jenny." And she's just completely ignoring him. But then, 10 or 15 minutes later, they're dancing together.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that is exactly him. Exactly. That's what you expect. I feel like with the level of, I guess, improv in this movie, you really do get what you expect from each of these actors playing these characters. Like, it's just what you expect. I know I said that. I keep saying that because I can't think of another way to say it. But I think it was perfect, is really what I'm trying to say. See, we haven't really talked about Debbie very much. And I think Minnie Driver was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
She was kind of deadpan sometimes. She was very sarcastic. But I think my very, very favorite thing from her is at the end when she's locked in the bathroom with her dad because, these assassins are trying to kill her dad. Martin comes to check on them and he opens the door and she just hands him this gun and says, "Make this gun work." And this is after she's already flipped out on him because she caught him killing this other dude. And she is not really processing what's happening. And she's just like, "Make this gun work." And I'm like, I love her. She's great.
Yeah. I thought she was, entirely, probably of all the roles I've seen Minnie Driver in, this is the most charming that she's been. I really liked her in this a lot. And she's got, her own walls and defenses up quite, for most of the movie. And it slowly breaks down. And I liked seeing that as well. That she kind of thaws out or whatever as she's becoming more and more hopeful, I guess, that Martin won't hurt her again. And he seems to be, genuinely wanting to get back together. So I think she has a very nice character arc, and I like that she does slap the crap out of him at one point for what he did,
Mm.
and and then what does she say? Like he comes in with flowers to pick her up to go to the reunion, and then she says, "I'll just go put these in some rubbing alcohol," So yeah, she wasn't really, she kind of rebuffs a lot of his romantic advances, and I thought that was good.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the stereotypical romance. I mean, and it wouldn't be. I mean, this movie is about murder and murder clubs and stuff, but they still go through that relationship arc that you would expect them to go through, and they still end up together in the end, which I absolutely loved because I didn't think they were, honestly. I wasn't sure how they were going to end it. I thought, he had just screwed up too much and there was just no way this was going to happen. And so I appreciate that they still did that traditional romance arc, but they kind of subverted it a little bit too. And it made it so fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. That it was not the typical on-screen romance at all. Both of
Mm.
them were very sort of wounded and cautious and tiptoeing around each other. But clearly there was also the attraction underneath it all. So
Yeah.
Yeah, she's such a confident character. Again, someone who will call people out on things or make comments on stuff, and so many of her lines are so direct, and even like you say, with the gun. Oh, she's so on top of everything. But the bit where they go out to drink and they're joined by the drunken friend. So what do you do, Marv? And he starts spinning a yarn of, I make southern fried chicken. And she genuinely laughs at him, and you're like, yeah, I can see them working together. I can actually see why they're good.
yeah, he knows what he's doing there.
Mm,
And, they're both kind of playing with the drunken friend a little bit, and yeah, so she's appreciating the tag team, I guess, that's going on.
yeah.
All right. Well, we've been talking about Grosse Point Blank for quite a while now. Is there anything that we've missed or anything else that you think we need to talk about the movie?
Normally at this point, I start talking about sequels, follow-ups, films that are connected in some way. There is a film connected to this called War Inc., which is an informal sequel. John Cusack is a murdering assassin. Joan Cusack is his assistant. Dan Aykroyd plays a small part. It's terrible. It's really bad. So no, we don't need to talk about any of that. It's got Hilary Duff in it. That was not a good film.
Interesting.
Yeah, I watched it because of the
Okay.
link to this, but I would not recommend it. We have High Fidelity on the list, which is fundamentally different, but is also a similar character in some ways. Different occupation, ofs, but
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen War Inc., but I've heard the same thing, that it's a little bit disappointing and not. I'm wondering if is it a completely different crew, different director, different. Well,
yeah,
obviously it's a different cast, so maybe that had quite a bit to do with it.
yeah, it was just very disappointing.
Maybe
Yeah.
they didn't
Okay.
improvise as much. Who knows?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the magic of this movie came from the improv that they
Mm.
did.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, at this point, we do usually like to ask our co-hosts if they have any additional recommendations for me to put on the list, things that you would hope that I have seen, because I probably haven't seen them because I've seen nothing at this point.
Well, since you like Cusack, you might want to go back and see one of his earlier films. Go look at Better Off Dead, because that has kind of a little bit of a cult following too, just for the crazy one-liners here and there. Just off the wall characters, like you can't believe it's an absurdist sort of comedy for sure. But then they do these, bizarre animation sequences as well. So
Oh dear.
yeah, yeah. So I would recommend putting that one on there, because that one winds up being a movie that we quote quite a bit. I think I've made reference to it in a couple of my books, especially there's a character named Booger. So uh,
Oh, okay.
yeah, he's classic. So check that one out.
Yeah, it is definitely on the list. I don't know when we'll get to it, but it is on the list, and several people have mentioned it, especially since we started talking about Grosse Point Blank too, because I think apparently it's a classic John Cusack movie, and I had no idea.
I'm still laughing about some of the things you know, who's the David Ogden Stiers is in it, and it's the only thing I've ever seen him in besides MASH. He played Winchester,
Hmm.
right? So to see him as the father in this movie really kind of cracked me up as well.
All right.
So we want to talk a bit about some of the listener feedback we've had on previous episodes. Sam at Darkness Random commented about The Dark Knight, how originally Two-Face had more realistic burns, but it was too disturbing for test audiences. Given how realistic the open face he had in the end was, it must have been quite graphic, I would imagine.
Yeah. And that was in response to my frustration that the makeup was the makeup was really good, but the CGI that went along with it was not as good because he could
Hmm.
still talk and all of that stuff. So I actually appreciate Sam letting us know why, like, that was an intentional choice that I didn't get. But that makes sense
Yeah.
if the makeup was too realistic that freaked people out.
Another comment we got about The Dark Knight was from IU Girl Jen. She, I think, enjoyed me commenting that Batman has a pistony thing. And that's the technical term for another gadget that he uses to do a thing to get out of a situation.
Could you be any more vague there? It's a pistony thing.
I am doing critical analysis and stuff.
Absolutely. We also got an email from our friend Anya, aka Strangely Literal. She wrote to us about the movie Jaws, and she said that it was a great episode on Jaws. However, I have to point out that while it's a really fun fictional movie, unfortunately, it's had some unintended consequences for sharks in real life. Many conservationists argue that Jaws made people more afraid of them than they should be, leading to higher levels of shark hunting. In fact, Jaws author Peter Benchley spent the second half of his career promoting shark conservation. Sharks are important predators for ocean ecosystems, and thankfully their populations are finally starting to rebound. This is partly due to changing attitudes about the risk of shark attacks. Keep up the good work. And, thank you for reaching out and telling us that, Anya, because I didn't even think about the kind of consequences that a movie like that could have on an ecosystem. I think that that's really interesting, and I'm glad that maybe folks were able to work to counteract that a little bit.
Because of Jaws, we get Shark Week to undo the damage.
Yes. Yes. Well, if you want to get in touch and give us your comments on this or any other movie we've discussed, you can use the hashtag PCDeprived on Twitter. You can also email us using podcast@eloquentgushing.com, or you can comment on this post on eloquentgushing.com. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter on our website, and every week you'll get a newsletter from us telling us what we're going to be doing that week and letting you know what's coming up so you can watch along with us. And you can find each of us on Twitter. I'm at Mandy K.
And I'm at Matthew Vose.
And I am also on Twitter at Kevin Hearne.
And you have a great website at kevinhearne.com.
I'm also on Instagram at Kevin_Hearne. And if you'd like to use Facebook, I am there as well. Facebook.com/author Kevin.
Please also remember to rate and review us on iTunes. It's the number one best way to help people discover the show. And as ever, if you do review us, let us know. We always like to read them, and we like to be able to say thank you to.
And if you really like what we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon. We now do have a Patreon. It is patreon.com/eloquentgushing. We'll be back next week with another episode of Pop Culturally Deprived, where we'll be joined by the amazing Lonnie Diane Rich to talk about When Harry Met Sally. Until next time, I'm Mandy Kay.
And if I show up at your door, chances are you did something to bring me there.
Pop Culturally Deprived is an Eloquent Gushing production. For more information, visit eloquentgushing.com or find us on Twitter at eloquentgushing.